Hi, I'm Bob Humphrey with another tip from Yamaha Outdoors, and today we're going to talk about turkey scouting. Pre-season scouting is probably one of the most important steps in a successful turkey hunt, and I'm going to give you a few tips and techniques today. One tip that some of my more serious turkey hunting buddies probably would just as soon I didn't divulge is that I do most of my scouting before the sun ever comes up in the morning. And I do it right from the front seat of my truck here. I'll ride around and I'll simply pull over, stop, and get out and listen. Listen for a gobble. If I hear one, I'll make a mental note of where that is. Maybe drive down the road a little bit and get out and listen again. And if I do that in 2 or 3 different spots, I can triangulate that gobbler's location and actually plot it on a map and come pretty close without ever actually leaving the vehicle or the side of the vehicle. And while hearing birds is good, there's no substitute for actually seeing them. And I do a lot of glassing. Good optics, good binoculars, a spotting scope can be a real help for locating birds and then identifying them. Here we've got a bunch of birds, and I want to get a closer look to find out if there are any longbeards in there or if they're just jakes. If the jakes, I might not bother with this group, but if there's a longbeard or two in there, which it looks like there is, this is a group I might want to look at a little bit more closely and put on my hit list for this spring. Now, a fairly common mistake people make when scouting turkeys is they'll find a group, they'll put it down on their list, and they'll call it good and move on to the next spot. But you really need to spend some time with these birds and watch not only where they come down out of the roost, but where they go after that, because you want to be set up. Give yourself as much time as possible to make the most out of your morning. You want to know where they're going to be at fly down. You want to know where they're going to be an hour after fly down. You might want to know where they're going to be 2 hours after fly down. In case plan A doesn't work, you can go to plan B and then plan C. So study the birds a little bit after fly down. Watch where they go. In addition to good optics, another tool that you can use to help with your turkey scouting is your smartphone. There's a number of different apps that you can use, but one in particular that I find very useful is called onX Maps, the hunt version. And how it works is, if I'm out scouting, I find a bunch of birds and it's a piece of property that I'm maybe not familiar with, I simply open the app and it'll tell me who the property owner is. Then I can go track them down and ask for permission to hunt on that piece of property. And scouting from a vehicle isn't restricted just to the hard surface roads either. If you have an ATV with a four-wheeler side-by-side, you can go out and do exactly the same thing. Get out there early in the morning, get on the trails, stop every so often, get out and listen. If you're in big wide open spaces like the Midwest or the West, you can get up on the high ground and you can glass so you can see a lot further. Get out there on your ATV, look around, listen, do some scouting that way. Now, seeing and hearing turkeys is great, but just because you don't see them or don't hear them doesn't mean they're not there. Eventually you're going to have to get off your ATV or get out of your truck, get out in the woods and wear out some shoe leather. Do some on-the-ground scouting. Now, obviously you're looking for some sign that the turkeys have been there, and there's a bunch of things you can look for. One of the most obvious is scratchings in the leaves. Okay, as the turkeys walk along, they scratch the leaves, uncover insects, seeds, nuts, those sorts of things. So scratchings, that's a good sign, and sometimes you can tell how fresh they are if maybe the ground around it is all dry, the leaves in the ground are dry, and then that little spot where the leaves have been turned over, the soil is moist. That might be an indication that it's somewhat fresh. In the spring, things are just starting to green up. You look where those bare spots are, and maybe there's a few fresh green shoots coming out. That's another sign that maybe the plants were growing under there and they got uncovered recently. Older stuff, you know, it's not as reliable a sign, so you might want to keep moving along and look for something a little bit fresher. Okay, other sign to look for in addition to scratchings is things like tracks. You see tracks if there's bare soil, if there's mud, if there's sand, you look for tracks. And pay attention to the weather. Maybe it rained recently. You see a nice clean track, that means it's fresh. That's a good indication that turkeys have been in that area recently. Feathers. You see feathers, particularly around roost sites. And if you see some big tall trees, usually evergreens, and there's feathers underneath, we might be near a roost site. Feathers on the ground. There may be a spot where the turkey stopped and preened itself, or maybe dusted. If you see a bowl-shaped depression in the soil, mid-morning, midday, sometimes they'll dust. They take a dust bath to clean themselves, rid themselves of parasites. Droppings. You see droppings, they usually don't last too long. So if you see droppings on the ground, that's another indication it's probably somewhat fresh sign. So I'll do my roadside or my trailside scouting early in the morning when the turkeys are gobbling the most. That's when I'll do my listening. A little bit later in the morning, as the sun comes up, the turkeys move around, I can cover ground and I can get out in glass. Then during the middle of the day, I'll go out on foot and do my on the ground direct scouting. That's when I'm looking for sign. That's when I'm going to cause the least amount of disturbance on those birds. So that's probably the best time to be in the woods. And then at the end of the day, I usually wait till just about sunset, till right at dark, maybe a little bit after dark, and then I'll try to roost a bird. And that's just a matter of giving the old barred owl hoot. And listen. And if you hear a response, okay, there's the bird. That's where he's going to bed tonight. I know where I'm going to be tomorrow morning. So, start early with your listening. Get out on the ground. Middle of the day. Try to roost a bird at night. That's about it for this time. But please check back again soon and often with Yamaha Outdoors.